Okay, great. I think we still have folks logging in. So I wanted to recognize the fact that yes, we're on. And the format of this presentation will be explained in a couple of minutes. So thank you for your patience. You are seeing a few faces on the screen. So this is a little different from the typical Zoom meeting that you may have had, where you see everyone's faces. And there are quite a few participants. So we just decided to do it this way. So I will have to repeat myself, but simply put, this is a webinar where the presenters will speak first and we will take questions from you so that we're able to answer them toward the end of the session, and that'll be the format. So again, I will wait for a couple of more minutes for people to log in and then we'll get started. So thank you very much for joining us. Just give us a minute or two. To log in. I think for the time management's sakes, because we did book an hour, I'll get started. So again, thank you very much for coming. I wish I can see you in person to say hello during shelter in place. I'm hoping that everyone is doing well and also being safe. Really short news for those of you who may not have heard. So you heard about a lot of different places having COVID issues and patients and also outbreaks. So for our campus, we got actually campus-wide testing done last week. That meant about over 900 people, that includes staff and the residents who live here. We tested 100% negative. And it was quite the feat because even we didn't know what to expect. But what it really tells us is that we do know how to keep our residents safe. We have a good standard practice for hygiene, and we've done an amazing job. Not me, but our nursing staff and everybody else have done an amazing job at keeping this campus absolutely safe. So I hope that adds to the layer of comfort that you're coming into the right place as we kind of wait out the shelter in place to ease up, hopefully. So on that note, and thank you, Deborah, for recognizing us. Yes, congratulations to everybody here. Thank you. So before we get started, I wanted to just let you know the format of this webinar. So again, this is not a Zoom meeting where we can interact because we have quite a few people participating at this moment. So what we will do is I will just briefly introduce our speakers today, whom you see on the screen, and then they will go into a presentation. And the slides that they'll be sharing will be available for you afterwards. So if you're thinking, wait, I missed that information, do not worry, we'll have them available for you along with the entire session. And the other piece is because of the fact that we have a lot of people, if you go to the very bottom of your screen, there's a window second from the left, which is called Q&A. There are 5 little buttons you can push. If you can use the Q&A window to send us questions, we will field them after the presentation and answer them for you. Again, we will see how much we can manage within the questions because this is a very hot subject for everybody, whether you're in the market or not. But we want to make sure that we do the best we can. And then, of course, if there are other questions, we will make sure to follow up with you directly. And then the speakers today will also be available for the follow-up questions. So again, a virtual welcome to everybody. And I really look forward to seeing everyone in person sooner than later. And today's meeting is based on the state of real estate. And this is always a hot subject because it's an indicator for the market. And I would say from what I've gathered from Jen Davis and Kevin Wakeland, who are on this meeting today, they're saying our market is holding very strong, which is very encouraging because I don't think the rest of the country can say the same thing. So what I have asked them to do is to give us an overview at a high level of what is happening and what we can expect. And both Jen Davis and Kevin Wakeland are with Compass San Francisco. It's one of the biggest names in real estate right now, very high-tech, innovative. And with their permission, I can say they bring 50 years of experience together. So apparently they started very early on in their careers to be able to have combined 25 years each, or maybe 20, 30, etc. But it's an honor for us to be able to invite the high professionals who can speak to the market at the professional level that I would expect for our depositors and the families to kind of anticipate. So without further ado, I will introduce Kevin Wakelin and Jen Davis, both from Compass San Francisco, and please take it away.
Hi, everyone. I'm Jen Davis. I'm with Compass Real Estate and really excited to be here to talk to you about real estate and the local market. Real estate agents were deemed essential about 2 weeks after we went shelter in place. So both Kevin and I have been in the trenches the last few months. And so we're really looking forward to sharing what's been happening.
Good afternoon, everybody. I echo Jen's sentiments. We've been actively working throughout the COVID shelter in place, and we're really thrilled to share some trends of the local markets with you today.
So next slide.
Are you seeing a slide there, Stacy?
I'm not, Tasha. Are we? Sorry for the technical difficulties. Apologize. There we go. And we're going to go to the first slide.
Just try to get them onto full screen. Yeah.
So that's us.
Ta-da.
And you can move on to the next slide. So you would think that the real estate market has collapsed, and you'd be surprised that it hasn't. So continue on to the next slide, please. So what Kevin and I are going to go over is a lot of content. We do have a fair amount of charts, and as Stacy mentioned, we will be sharing the slides afterward. We won't spend a lot of time on the charts, so again, we're open to questions afterward, but just keep in mind we have a lot of content to cover, so hopefully we'll go at a good pace for you. Yes.
I'll insert myself really quickly. For the folks, as a reminder, please use the Q&A window, not the chat room window. It would be great because I want to collect everybody on the same side. So please use Q&A window as you want to ask questions. We would appreciate it. Sorry, Jen.
Oh, no, thank you for doing that. So what we're going to cover, we're going to talk about this in phases. Phase one, the impact of, well, first, where we were before coronavirus. The next phase is the impact of coronavirus during shelter in place. Phase two is the rebound, is what's happening right now. Phase three, we're going to talk about the trends that we've been seeing, how we sell houses during this time. And then finally, we've got some concluding remarks. Okay, next slide, please. So January 2020, what we were looking at, we were in a pretty solid position. We had, over the past 8 to 10 years, steady price appreciation of homes. Now, this is for San Francisco, not the entire Bay Area. We have that information available should you want. But we were looking at about an $800,000 average about 8 to 10 years ago, up to 1.6 in January. Over the past 12 months, we had sold about approximately 6,200 units. Employment was at an all-time high, and the stock market was at all-time high. And San Francisco had the high honor of being among the highest housing costs in the nation. Next slide, please. So what you're looking at is a 30-year average of what happened during the various crises that we've seen. So this chart starts in the early 1990s, in the early 1990s recession, and it's following the growth of the real estate market. And you can see coming out of the early 90s, it was climbing pretty steadily until the dot-com boom in the mid-90s. And then it continues to climb because it wasn't too much of a hit. It continues to climb to the middle of the chart. And that's where we're at 2008 and the financial crisis. You can see things took a dramatic dip, and we started to recover up and down until about 2012, where we got to where we are today. That recovery back in 2010, 2012, in a large part was due to the payroll tax cut, that Mary Lee at the time had allowed Twitter to open their headquarters here. And a lot of tech companies began headquartering here in San Francisco. It brought a lot of tech workers in. It created a lot of wealth, a lot of demand for real estate. So we've been on a long climb for quite some time. Next slide.
So let me jump in here and to take off from where we were at with a very strong market for the last 10 years. I think the stats were 100% appreciation in our local real estate from 2012 to 2019. So that's effectively doubling your real estate value in that 7-year period. So we had a really robust market. Along comes 2020, and we start the year thinking we're going to be rolling into another strong, robust year. And as we all know, a new force came from left field. So let's talk about the impact on real estate from this coronavirus impact. Next slide, please. Jump one more. So this graph here, I know you probably can't read all the details at the bottom, but this is effectively showing you the number of daily new cases across the globe and what the impact was to the 10 most affected countries. The scale at the bottom starts in February and runs to the right to May 2020. And of course, you can see one graph that stands out far more higher than anybody else, and that's the USA. So what was happening before that graph started was coronavirus starting in January in China. We were starting to see something happening from left field, but we were moving forward in January and February with the market picking up. In January, at the end of January, January 31st, the US declares a state of emergency. So that starts to show you how the impact was starting to hit us and the acknowledgement of the impact to us. By February 2nd, the US had banned all inbound flights from China. So as that patch of time was going on, February, we started to see things getting a little wobbly, but we hadn't hit that time in March where things were starting to look tough. In February, next slide please, it was the stock market that started to show the first fears of the coronavirus hitting the US shores. And as Jen was saying, by mid-February, the stock market had hit an all-time high, February 12th, of 29,551. From that point forward, the investors could see that there could be a threat to our economy, and the stock market started to slide. You can see in the red graph that the stock market lost over 8,000 points in about 5 weeks of time ending mid-March. That is a 28% drop, one of the biggest drops over the shortest periods of time since the Great Depression. So as you all know, the stock market has a big impact on real estate. Many homeowners, many buyers have their money tied up in the stock market. And when that liquidity drops, so does their ability to buy. So if we can take a look at the next slide, can we go one more? And then we'll come back to the employment. Because by mid-March, San Francisco, Bay Area, was one of the first regions to start the shelter-in-place order. We were far ahead of most of the country. That kept us all safe, that kept us all at home, but what it also did is prevent people from going to work and businesses being able to continue employing their employees. Can we go back one slide, please? This is a graph that shows how the jobless claims skyrocketed from the end of February and into March. We all know, we've seen the news headlines of massive job losses. In fact, we're probably at around over 40 million job losses to date. That is the highest rate since post-World War II. The impact of people losing their jobs, unable to pay their mortgages, has a direct impact on real estate. If we could move on to 2 more slides forward. One more, please. So this is another graph that replicates the one that Jen showed a little earlier of where we were before COVID hit. And as Jen said, we had a really robust market, Appreciation was rising every year, year over year. So you can imagine that in 2020, we had the bones of a strong market. We were leading into the spring selling season with high hopes of another strong year. COVID hits, stock market crashes, unemployment starts to rise as shelter in place kicks in mid-March. Let's go to the next slide. Where we were in March is a seasonal repetition that we see in the San Francisco real estate market. This slide shows you that seasonality. Spring and summer are strong, high transaction seasons for us in San Francisco, the Bay Area. Summer and winter are slower seasons. Summer, people are going on vacation. They take their eyes off the buying process. August, people are away, and obviously in the end of the year, people focus on the holidays, and they're not in the buying, selling mode. In spring, there's people changing schools, and so people changed where they live based on where their kids are going to go to school. So you can see from these peaks of spring 2018, spring 2019, those are pretty substantial rises in activity from the winter before. So that's where we were expecting spring 2020 to be. So if we could roll to the next slide, you can see the first impact that happened in real estate when SIP took hold. Mid-March, March 16th, San Francisco goes into shelter in place. What do sellers do? They react. They think with fear that there might be an impending recession. So what do? They yank their listings off the market. The peak of that graph that you can see to the right represents the number of listings that were removed from the market in March, a substantial number, a record-breaking number. So if we could go to the next slide, the combination of existing listings being removed from the market and new listings that would have come onto the market that were planned for March and April and May to make use of the strong spring season were also delayed. So you can see that the homes for sale just plummeted. And so we ended up with a period of time, March and April, with very low inventory. That would change the price equation normally when supply drops. But what did buyers do? They pulled back too. Buyers didn't want to jump forward into buying new property in such uncertain times when the economy was having such a big slowdown because of the coronavirus. So buyers pulled back, sellers pulled back, and activity dropped. So let's roll to the next slide. And so during this period of time, we could see a lot of reactive decisions being made. We wanted to share with you a couple of case studies that Jen and I experienced during this time to make those numbers a little real. So we'll start with 46 Mars and 48 Mars. They are two homes side by side that we brought to the market on February 14th. So that was our grand opening. We had high hopes of selling these quickly and for above asking price. 46 Mars was a 1-bed, 1-bath, very small house listed at 1250 that went into contract right away, day zero, in fact, for $50,000 above the asking price. That had a 30-day escrow, which took us past the March 16th shelter in place. During that time period, not only were buyers and sellers nervous about the market, so were lenders. This buyer lost their lender after they had removed their contingencies. We were 3 days before closing escrow. The buyer's agent calls us and says, we've got a problem. The buyers lost their financing through no fault of the buyer. We extend the close of escrow, I think 3 weeks, and we help the buyers seek a new lender. And of course, we were under the gun. We had to find a lender that could step in and take over and get the buyer to the finish line and close. So that is an example of a property that was mid-flow during SIP that got hit by this where the financing fell through. But we got a new lender in, recovered and closed. Fortunately, we had a buyer that wanted to stay at the table. Many buyers didn't. Some buyers renegotiated with their sellers for discounted prices. Some buyers even pulled out completely and left their 3% deposit in escrow for the seller because the loss of their 3% is less than the loss from the stock market losses if they'd actualized those losses by getting their money out of the stock market for their down payment. 48 Mars, slightly different story. We came out on the same day. This is a slightly bigger house, 2-bed, 2-bath. This did not get an offer before COVID. So when March 16th happened, shelter in place, real estate came to a grinding halt, we took this listing off the market. We were one of those listings that withdrew. We sat on the sidelines for 4 to 5 weeks while we watched to see what was happening in the marketplace. By the time we came back at the end of April, when the shelter in place had adjusted to phase 2, we could start doing private appointments. We lowered the price slightly from 1895 to 1825. We did some minor upgrades while we were offline. Fortunately for us, the first buyer that came in gave us an full asking 1825 offer, and we just closed today without any hiccups. So we're really thrilled that 48 Mars closed escrow today. So those two examples shows you different examples of one property getting hit by the lender, changing landscape, and the other one being flexible, adjusting to the circumstances, re-strategizing with the seller, and then re-entering the market with a slightly different price, slightly different position to get a successful sale. Next slide, please. So from here, Jen would like to talk about the rebound from that point.
Phase 2, so markets on the rebound. Next slide, please. So economists across the country have been debating about what kind of recovery we're going to see, whether it's V-shaped, U-shaped, the swoosh, also known as a hockey stick, or the square foot. So just this morning, Lawrence Yun, the chief economist for the National Association of Realtors, he predicted that across the country, it was going to be a V-shaped recovery. Locally, we're thinking it would be more of a hockey stick recovery. And here's why. Next slide, please. So just on Monday, the 30-year fixed mortgage interest rate is an historic low of 3.13%. That is spurring a lot of activity. There is an increase in new home mortgage applications. There's also an increase in refinances. What Lawrence Yun has says he'd seen across the country a rising spending on home improvement. Many sellers are improving their homes so they can bring them on the market. Buyers are wanting to take advantage of these low rates and lock them in. And they're also hedging a bit against uncertainty. One of the things when we look at real estate, we have to look very close, near within a very short window of time. One of the things we do worry about is next year. We don't know what the impact will be with when the unemployment numbers shake out, with businesses that made it. We don't know, but we know right now there is things to take advantage of, and it has been spurring activity. Next slide, please. So I have a few slides for the Bay Area to show what the hockey stick looks like. So in this, at the bottom of the page are dates that started back end of December, and it goes through May 11th. And these are the number of listings and accepted offers. So sellers are putting their homes on the market, buyers are making offers, and sellers are accepting them. So as you can see, this is becoming more of an L-shaped, or excuse me, a hockey.
You put the J shape.
So this is the San Francisco market. Next slide, please. This is San Mateo.
Same thing occurring.
Next slide, please. And Marin County.
That's overtaken where we were at pre-shelter in place.
And we can talk more about what's happening in the trends and why Marin, we're seeing certainly quite a spike there. Next slide, please. And Sonoma County, also there's quite a spike. Next slide.
So let's talk about what we think is going to be happening this summer. And to the point of the last two slides, Sonoma had a skyrocketing high recovery in the number of listings going into contract. We all know Sonoma is full of many second homes. So that'll come through in the next slide when we talk about some of the summer trends that we foresee happening between the buyers and the sellers. And as we titled this slide, Chaos Creates Movement. And that might seem a bit strange, but if you think about the crisis that we're in, we've been thrust to stay in our homes for what, 3 long months now. We know our homes more intimately than we ever did before, all the good and all the bad. And so you can imagine, after being stuck at home for so long, there are people wanting to move for more space. So if we look at some of these trends that the buyers are pointing to. First of all, they want to get back to business. They've sat on the sidelines for 3 months, and they've got some ideas of what they want to do.
So we call it, there's a few factors going on. There is a migration, particularly with young families that are living in the city. They are crossing the bridges, going to Marin, East Bay, even down to San Mateo, looking for either additional bedroom, outdoor space, more peace, not so busy in the city. There's also a trend for those that live in the city that want to upgrade. And I have a couple of stories I want to talk about a little bit more on the high end.
So the other part too is that we've noticed that people who are planning to downsize into smaller homes have put that on hold. They want to wait until the shelter in place is over, until they start downsizing and losing their big home. The other part, as Jen was talking about, was the interest rates. That's a huge motivation for buyers, especially for first-time home buyers. The rates that they can lock in are pretty incredible. In fact, I had one buyer who locked in a 10-year ARM at 2% for 10 years fixed. Isn't that incredible? With inflation, that's actually free money. So that happened last month. Incredible lock. The other part too is that renters are starting to shift to become buyers more so than normal. Why? Because of interest rates. They pay high rents in San Francisco. They've put some savings aside. Now they see the time to buy in the year ahead. The other part too is buyers don't want to do construction projects right now for a lot of issues around safety. They don't want to have to go through that process. They want done turnkey homes. And so to the point Jen was making earlier, sellers are using capital from their houses through HELOCs and the low interest rates to do those improvements so they can sell turnkey homes. The other part too is that folks are looking for not just space in their house, but a little bit more separation of space. If you know the last, 10, 20 years, the open plan, big wide open spaces was the fashionable, popular design. Folks are looking for a little bit more separation. Maybe the traditional floor plans are coming into vogue a little bit more, maybe a blend where you've got some open space, but some defined spaces to have some solo time when your kids are home, you're trying to get some work done, and you want to have some peace and quiet. So
there's, you'll see a lot of headlines about the great migration from San Francisco, and now that you can work from home, why live in San Francisco, go live anywhere you want. Some of that's true, but there are a lot of people that really enjoy the camaraderie of working at a company and what comes of that. So while some may relish the idea of working from home for the rest of their lives or for a long period of time, there's just as many that will not want that. And if one tech company does not offer a work in the office, there's just as many that will allow that as shelter-in-place restrictions ease up. There's been a lot of headlines about commercial real estate, just to digress from residential for a moment. And when you think about it, when it's time for us to go back to work in an office space, if they're at half capacity, they're going to need, if they're going to, Facebook, for example, is hiring 30,000 people over the next year or so. They're going to need more space, even if they're at half capacity. So there's going to be a demand at some point for more commercial space.
So the other side of the equation is the sellers. And what are sellers looking to do? Again, like buyers, they are desperate to get back to business now. They either took their houses off the market or they delayed putting their homes onto the market. So now that sheltering in place is easing up, we can do a lot more activities on properties now, safely, of course. We're seeing sellers who want to leave the city for more space. We're seeing sellers who just want to upgrade, stay in the city, but find a bigger home.
In fact, at the very high end, and I'm meaning 10 million or more, we had an amazing few months. 10 homes in San Francisco, over 10 million, 8 sold during this period. 8 of the 10 buyers live in San Francisco, so that they were not migrating. They love San Francisco so much, they wanted to spend another $5–10 million to get that bigger home.
They upgraded.
They upgraded,
They upgraded.
In the city of San Francisco.
So as we were saying earlier, sellers are sprucing up their homes. They're making use of the advice of realtors, designers, to do the repairs, to do the deferred maintenance, to do the painting, to do the staging, to present their homes in the best possible way to the buyers, who can then walk in, turnkey, not have to do a project once they have bought the house. The other part too that sellers are doing is saying, okay, we don't want people coming into our home. We've got to maintain safety protocols. So they're relying on their realtors to do more virtual and visual selling techniques versus your traditional open house. And Jen will talk a little bit more about that in detail.
What did you want to
Oh, so just to wrap up the seller side here, there's also been a shift in how they see the positioning of pricing on their homes. Strategies before COVID would be to price with a little bit of a discount in, expecting lots of people to come through open houses and to have multiple bids and multiple bids driving up their price through competition. In today's market, without open houses replaced by private tours, we are now pricing properties more transparently at value. So that's a big shift in the strategy of how we price properties. Buyers actually obviously like the transparency of this is the price. If you like it, write an offer and we will sell at that price versus expecting to have a higher price.
But either way, be sure to consult with a real estate advisor on pricing, so you know the market comparables and you know that this is a at market value, just a side note.
Yeah, in fact, some of the surveys from California Association of Realtors pointed to 75% of sellers not expecting to have any price adjustment of value on their homes post-COVID. So while they're willing to negotiate, they're not looking at fire sales. They do not see the values of their real estate dropping significantly. And in fact, we've heard some stats where those negotiations in San Francisco have led to maybe a 2 to 3% discount on properties over 2 to 5 million. The ones over 5 million might go from 5, maybe 10% tops when you're talking 10, 20 plus $1 million properties. So they're pretty confident in the value of their homes and how robust the market is. Next slide, please. Okay, so we're going to do a little bit of a deep dive into 2 districts of San Francisco. We picked District 7 and District 5. For those of you that know San Francisco, you will know the Marina, Cow Hollow, Pacific Heights, Presidio Heights. These are high-value neighborhoods on the north side of town. They're very well established. Pacific Heights is known for its mega mansions, same with Presidio Heights. Down the hill into Cow Hollow, more condos, and then into the Marina, a mix of condos, single-family homes. But again, Marina has high-value homes too. Those looking out onto the bay are priced from $5 million up. So we're going to do a little bit of diving into District 7. So if you could take to the next slide, we're going to show you some graphs. I'm going to share some numbers with you of what's been happening the last few weeks and months. So this slide shows you the inventory of active listings in District 7. The axis at the bottom is from January 29 to January 2020. And then to the right of January 2020, you can see how the inventory dropped in that February-March timeframe, and for both single-family homes, that is in orange, and condos, that's in purple, we've seen the return of inventory to the market in Pacific Heights. Next slide, please. And here again, new listings. Pacific Heights, Presidio Heights, Cow Hollow, the Marina have got high-end, high-value houses. In fact, one of the sales recently was for $21 million. So we're seeing a return more on the condos than single-family homes. There's far less single-family homes than condos in District 7. Let's take a look at the next slide. And look at sales price. For single-family homes, as inventory dropped, prices went up. That's a supply and demand function. So you can see that the price of single family homes has really returned to the prices that we were seeing in the spring summer season of 2019. Condos have remained quite flat because there's more supply, more inventory. Let's get the next slide. I think that's the end of that one. But let me give you guys some data on District 7 for March 1st to May 31st. That's a 3-month window. In that window, District 7 sold 117 single family homes. The average list price of those single family homes was $6.1 million, and the average sale was $5.9 million, so slightly less than list. The average price per square foot is $1,460 per square foot, and it took on average 37 days to sell a property in District 7 over that 3-month window. So we've got some pretty solid numbers, some pretty good speeds of closing, and a lot of volume. Let's take a look at District 5 now. For those of you that know the South Side, you'll be familiar with Noe Valley, Glen Park, Mission Dolores, Castro, Corona Heights, DuBois Triangle, and Twin Peaks. It's a much bigger district than District 7. If you go to the next slide, we're going to look at some graphs and numbers here. In District 5, the inventory of active listings has dropped for condos. We've got so many of them. It was saturated as we went into the market, but single family homes have ticked back up in the last couple of months. Next slide. In the District 5, both the single family homes and condos have not picked back up yet. So there's a reduction in supply, which means pricing is going to be stronger. There's been a delayed reaction to get homes back on the market, but I would say in the last 2 weeks, we're seeing a lot more houses hit District 5, both personally, our colleagues, we're seeing quite a few.
And as, on a side note, about 10%, 50% of the market is done off market, the sales. So they're not reflected. These are directly from the multiple listing service. So there is a portion of off market sales that never hit these public numbers.
So let's take a look at the next slide. And so here's the median sales price. Single family homes are starting to pick back up. Again, there's low inventory is going to push that back up. Condos, we have a lot of them in District 5 that's still remaining flat as buyers are still negotiating that 2 to 5% reduction on the houses that are on the market today. Let me give you some stats for District 5. In the last 3 months, we've seen 390 sales of single family homes. The average list price in District 5 is $2.5 million, with the average sale price of single family homes at 2.7. So there shows you that higher price difference between list and sale. In fact, the highest sale in District 5 was a home for $8.7 million. The average price per square foot is $1,260 a foot, 1,260. And the average days on market, a little less than District 7 at 22 days. So we've got a lot more inventory. We're seeing prices outstrip list pricing and homes selling faster. Let's take a look at the next slide. All of this data will be available to you guys at the end.
So how do we sell homes during SIP and beyond? So until we have a vaccine, we are going to have limitations. Next slide, please. So currently there are no public open houses. Gone are the days where when there is a listing, there's 50 to 100 people walking through someone's home. Gone are broker tours. Everything is done by appointment. There are safety protocols we have to follow, everyone needs to follow. First, anyone entering a property needs to sign what's called a property entry advisory form, whether that's an agent, a client, a stager, a contractor, everyone needs to sign it. And everyone needs to have PPE, so masks, gloves, hand sanitizers, soap and water. The agents, we take great care to make sure that there's no need to touch any surfaces. Doors are opened, closet doors are open, drawers are open so that the person can just walk through. And if you go to the next slide, please. So we first, though, have to generate interest in the property before an appointment can even happen. So the technology we've been using has been enhanced greatly. We use videos, 3D tours, virtual walkthroughs. Virtual walkthroughs are when we're actually physically inside the property and we're taking the client through the property and walking them through the home. And we ask that before an appointment is made, that the client has had a chance to watch the videos, the 3D tour, and do the virtual walkthrough, so that when it comes to the point of showing a home, it's a very, very well qualified buyer. We have a sample of a video to show that what that looks like, and it's just about a minute, so please take a look. Oh, and you know, the quality may be off because of Zoom.
And is the music on or off?
There's music as well.
That's why I'm not having music.
You guys can sing.
Yes, there's usually lovely music.
Well, yeah, I could say
it.
this is somewhat anticlimactic.
We'll better see this with music
Yeah.
afterwards when they're replaying this. But on Zoom calls,
It's the Zoom
it's
client.
always, videos are always
Choppy.
choppy.
Yeah.
Mhm, mhm.
You can go to the next slide. So what we're seeing is that the spring market has not gone away. It's just been deferred. It's happened. The spring market is happening this summer. Normally, typically, as Kevin had mentioned, the summer market is slower because people are going on vacations, their kids are out of school. It's a slower time. But this summer, many people will not be going on vacation, or at least flying and going away. The buying decisions that they were going to make in the spring have now been pushed to the summer market. So essentially, this market has not been lost.
It's just been pushed back. So we're expecting to see that high peak traffic in the March, April, May season typically get pushed back into our June, July, August. And Jen was just saying, August typically is a really quiet month, but we're seeing so much more activity that when shifting with that time frame and bringing on properties in June and July, knowing that the buyers will be there to come see it.
So certainly we have to recognize that a lot of buyers have been knocked out of the market and a lot of sellers have been knocked out of the market. But the newer activity are those that were thinking about selling or buying in a couple of years, and staying home for 3 months has really accelerated those decisions. So that's why we're seeing a lot more resurgence of interest. They're moving up their decisions now. Next slide, please.
So let's jump into some concluding remarks. If you could jump to the next slide. This is where we get out our crystal ball to try and look into the rest of the year. But we think that the real estate market and how we perceive the rest of the year is going to be based on some changing dynamics. The first thing is the coronavirus and sheltering in place. What is happening on that front? Fortunately, in California, we were very quick to get onto the shelter in place program that really flattened the curve. And you've seen from all the news headlines that California has, for the 40 million people that we have here, has a great success so far, especially in the Bay Area, maybe less so in the Southern California, but here in the Bay Area, we've had a great success in flattening that curve and staying sheltering in place for going on 3 months. Next slide, please. The concern, of course, is that balance between health and economy. We want to get the shelter in place lifted as quickly as possible to get back to business, get the economy started. But of course, the faster we do that, the higher the risk of a second resurgence in the virus. So we have to be careful around that type of planning, which our local government, local officials are keenly watching. Next slide, please. But ultimately, we're all looking at the vaccine. When does the vaccine come to take this pandemic and take it off the table where we can get back safely to work? We've all heard a big range of timeframes from 12 to 18 months to it's going to happen end of this year. We just don't know. We certainly aren't the experts in the medical field. We're watching the news just like you are. But the vaccine looks like a line in the sand that will hopefully get us back to a recovered market where we can focus on the recovery of the economy. Next slide, please. So as Jen was pointing out in the rebound, we are seeing that the buyers and sellers have been eager to get back to business. They are bringing traffic to the streets, and we are seeing listing, receiving offers and going into contract and closing. So we're seeing that J curve back return. We're seeing that this deferred market is going to make the third and fourth quarter of 2020 locally be a strong, robust market because of deferment. What happens in 21, we're not sure. Next slide, please. It's that crystal ball gazing. We don't have enough data. It depends on many factors with the response to the coronavirus, the response to the economic fallout of unemployment, businesses closing, and how that shakes out this year. So we've got some concluding remarks and key takeaways we want to share with you. First of all, the economy was in great shape before this outbreak occurred. But it has changed everything as we know it for the year ahead, many unknowns. The scale of this pandemic is global. It's not just local, but I think that locally we have done a much better job than many other regions in dealing with the health crisis first. The fallout of unemployment hasn't hit our shores yet because of the strong job platforms that we have in the Bay Area. But 21, 22, we don't know what that unemployment hit will be for the housing market. So there's still all this data that's going to be compressed as time comes in for us to evaluate. The biggest issue is unemployment. We've seen a lot of job losses in the Bay Area. Can these businesses recover? Can those closed businesses reopen? Can they reemploy the folks who have either been furloughed, lost their jobs, and on unemployment? So all of those impacts have hit us in different ways today than they will in the future. But it's definitely going to be a factor of how long we stay sheltered in place. We're moving through phase 2, I think now into phase 2C in San Francisco. So things are starting to open up. But as long as we don't have a pullback that throws everybody out to make a strong resurgence, I think we've got a very positive outlook for the real estate market for the rest of this year based on the stats we're seeing, the data we're reading, and our own personal experiences of buyers and clients and sellers.
So the information changes rapidly. So every week we have new information to insert, but we're here for questions, and we're quite thrilled to have been here to talk about the local market today.
Thank you, Kevin and Jen, so much. That's a lot of information to digest. So I think I might have to go back to the slides too. I have some questions here, and I think some of these may have been kind of answered. But before I do start, quite a few of you asked me, so when are you opening for Frank Residences? And I don't have a crystal ball on that either. It's like watching paint dry, because at the phase, it's really hard to tell how it's going to shift. And I check in with our contractors every day. But what I do know is that what Jen and Kevin have just presented as fall and winter being strong might really work to your advantages if you're thinking of selling your home, because we are going to be basically having you move in fall. Now, when is that fall? Is it early September, which is my wish and my hope? And I think it's kind of a hopeful scenario. Maybe it's a little later because we have 2 hurdles. One is the temporary certificate of occupancy when the building is complete. And we're expecting that to happen in summer. And we're hoping that it's going to happen in the next few weeks, actually, if everything goes well. That's part one. Second part is harder to predict because we have to get the approval from Department of Social Services for them to bless the fact that this building is ready for you to move in. That's the part that we really have no idea. Traditionally, that takes 30 to 90 days. We're hoping we can manage that in 30 to 60 days. That puts us in the window of fall, early fall. So I'm looking at September as the month, and that's my crystal ball, but don't call me on it because if things change, we'll let you know. So with that, question number one, um, you guys have to kind of entertain this, Jen and Kevin, so I'm kind of going out of order, but are people seriously buying multi-million-dollar homes with a video tour?
No, so what the steps are is viewing the video tour. Then many times there's a three-dimensional tour and a virtual walkthrough where the agent we're on the phone and talking through the client. And at that point, if the client is interested enough to have an in-person showing, then an in-person showing. So that's how someone can purchase a home, because you do need to walk through a home. From time to time, someone will buy a home without walking through it. Usually a very, very experienced investor, but there are private appointments after all those steps have been followed.
The other thing to note about private appointments, they are governed and regulated right now by CalOSHA and the California Association of Realtors. Those private appointments must be set whereby only one agent and two guests can go into a property at any one time. So you cannot go in there with a big group of people. And if a group of people come with the buyer, say it's a family of 6, you would have to do 3 tours while people wait outside through the property. And as Jen was saying, that sequence of events, photos first, videos first, virtual tours first, then they sign the PED form. Once they've signed that property access form, then they set up their property tour. They look at the disclosure package. We review the disclosure package, but they definitely see the property in person in a private tour before writing an offer.
And I think this is going to improve the real estate market or the real estate industry, because this really pre-qualifies a buyer, and you don't get the casual observer coming through. You get a solid potential client, or a solid potential buyer.
Okay. I'm going to go to a few more questions. So this was addressed, but maybe you can kind of, just kind of go back to it, is that as tech companies move to long-term and permanent work from home virtual offices, is it likely that people will move to lower cost of living markets, eroding the value of residential real estate in this area? And this was touched on, but I wonder if you can follow through a little bit.
There certainly are some. I mean, I've seen it with renters, young workers, young renters. They're leaving I have one couple, they're leaving to move to Santa Fe. Google is work from home until the end of the year, so they're going to work from there. When that policy changes, they're going to reevaluate whether they come back to the Bay Area or not. So certainly we're going to see people, I think a fair amount of people, renters, taking the summer off, moving somewhere else. And there will be some that do want to move out of the city altogether or the Bay Area. But again, as we were talking earlier, when it comes to this work from home status, there are a lot of people that really enjoy working with their coworkers, and they do want that camaraderie, and they do want that in-person workforce. So once the vaccine is figured out, I would bet that we're going to see more working from office.
Yeah, I'd also say that the city, San Francisco, has always been a magnet for folks to come live in San Francisco. We have the global energy engine of the world in Silicon Valley. The time frames that we're talking about, I think, are much bigger than the time frames of the coronavirus issues today. We have short-term solutions to short-term problems. It will create some new trends, but I think that the bigger trends of people wanting to live in cities will always be true. There will always be younger millennial generations coming on up and wanting to live in city, to have that experience. And in a year's time, 2 years' time, will it look like today? No, it won't. It'll look a little bit more normalized. So those trends we can see today as being quite sharp and distinct, I think they will soften out over the year to 2 years' time.
But at the end of the day, what drives real estate is changes in life, births, marriages, divorces, children, all of the downsizing. That's what drives home sales.
And then there's another one, again, this was kind of touched upon, but perhaps you can kind of reiterate it. How long are the homes on the market right now?
Say that again, Stacey.
How long are the homes on the market currently?
It depends on the neighborhood. Right, the last few months, Kevin read some statistics from District 7 and District 5, and they were under 30 days.
It's still
I
under
think it depends on, I mean, these are averages. The real story can be told when you dive a little deeper, and we can certainly do that individually with your guests here. It depends on how each property is priced. It depends on how each property is presented. There's a big range around how different properties are presented and priced. Some price aggressively, and they might stay on the market longer. But if you have the right strategy between presentation, positioning, and generating traffic, you'll get to the fastest sale as quickly as possible. But as Jen was saying, District 7, 37 days on market is average. On District 5, 22 days. We've had experiences where properties sell in the first week with preemptive offers. There are still all cash buyers in the Bay Area. There are folks who did not liquidate out of the stock market in March and have done now, as that stock market has regained about 75% of its losses. So there's still a lot of buyers out there with liquidity, with cash, and with well-financed offers.
Well, there are a few Frank residences specific questions that we will follow up with you directly later. And also there are a few requests that say, can we talk about different parts of the city rather than just, 2 districts, which we can, I'm sure, do, again, on the individual basis. And I will have the experts follow up with you on that. The only question I want to end with actually is, that's a good point. Marlene says, not clear what point number 8 means in conclusion remark.
Oh, severe pullback may be best.
Chance for quick recovery.
What's this?
Severe pullback may be best chance for quick recovery. You're talking about the shelter in place.
Yes. The pullback in terms of sheltering in place, how that is managed is going to be the directest impact to the economy.
Okay, and again, it's a lot of information to discover. So what we want to do is we have captured the questions that came through, and that those that need to follow through, we will follow up with you directly. And the information that was presented today will be available for our depositors. And once again, thank you all of you for attending. I wish we could see you in person, but this is a lot better than just sitting at home, spending another hour on streaming Netflix for God knows how long. So I want to thank Jen and Kevin for making the time to give us this high overview of what's happening in San Francisco real estate. And to me, it's a very positive message. I'm stuck on 2% 10-year ARM. I can't believe it. Maybe I should just go into refinancing to see what's going on. I know that most of you who are on this call probably have paid off your home, lucky you. But those of us or people that if they're thinking of refinancing, that sounds very promising. I think it's one keynote that you can take away with you for those people who, still have a mortgage like me. So again, thank you very much. We will follow up with you. And if you have questions or if you want to get in contact, just email Tasha, and then we'll make sure that we funnel through the information and we'll connect you. So thank you, everyone. Have a great.
Thank you. Goodbye.
Thank you.
Goodbye.